Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone, episode number 158. Already 158 for the 29th of October 2011. Richard Saunders here with you from downtown New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm at the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry Convention, SciCon. SciCon is what they're calling it. I'm in the book room, which is strangely empty at the moment because everyone else is upstairs listening to a panel on conspiracy theories. I think it's a conspiracy that I'm not there. I'm actually here to tell you about this week's episode of The Skeptic Zone. Now, we're going to go back in time a week. We're going to go back to Melbourne, where our reporters, Maynard, of course, in particular, was at Skepticamp. Maynard lined up a lot of people to talk to down there. He kicks off with Lucas Randall, who was one of the people behind Skepticamp, then talks to Peter Miller about Shoe Tag, the questionable device for your pets to keep those fleas and ticks away. Catches up with Peter Bowditch Ratbag, the famous Ratbag, for a take on what he was talking about. In fact, I'm sure that Peter would love to be here in New Orleans. He asked me to have a bourbon for him. I better do that. Following that, we have Jason Brown, the famous Sydney skeptic. And then the feature interview, Maynard talks to our reporter Joanne Benhumu about bottoms. Oh yes, colonic irrigation, enemas, all that sort of stuff. And in fact, if you hit pause now, you can spend the rest of the 5 minutes telling bum jokes. Got that? Thank you. That's very good. Saves me from doing it. And then to wrap up the show, we go back to Sydney where Dr. Rachie went to the annual Shonky Awards by Choice magazine. Now, you might remember that last year, Power Balance Wristband won a Shonky Award, and it was part of the process that led to their downfall. This year, Rachie goes along to the Shonky Awards, the press launch, had a great time, and spoke to Choice Magazine's Chris Barnes about some of the winners, who were all losers, at this year's Shonkies. Now, later on in this episode of The Skeptic Zone, I'll try to catch up quickly with a few of the people attending this wonderful convention here. I've never been to New Orleans before. Haven't had much of a chance to get out and about, but it looks really nice. Lots of tourists, lots of people running about. But for now, I'm going to run upstairs. I'm going to enjoy the rest of the conspiracies talk while you enjoy the Skeptic Zone.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Tell you what, you turn the corner everywhere and there's people to chat to here, and I'm talking to Lucas because he's got a big Lucas stamp on his chest there, and I saw you setting up the Wi-Fi earlier here at Skepticamp. And what's been your role at Skepticamp Melbourne?
I'm the main organiser of Skepticamp, so myself and Chris Higgins have put together most of the event, a couple of other helpers.
So what, is this just some drunken idea that turned up at the pub on a Friday night? Well, what made you think to put it on?
We were coerced at Skepticamp Sydney. I think Jason Brown did such a great job up there with that event, and Dave the Happy Singer and so forth, so we went up there, we saw that, and we thought it was a fantastic idea, so thought we'd replicate it in Melbourne.
Now, what are the basic differences? I mean, people go on about the difference between Sydney and Melbourne, and since I'm not from either town, I can look at both of them and go, get over it. But what are the differences between Skepticamp Melbourne and Sydney in the ideas? Is there any?
The ideas, I don't think so. I've overheard some of the conversations that have been occurring after the talks here, and they're very similar in both towns. And having lived in both towns for a long part of my adult life, I can probably comment quite well on it. I lived in Sydney for 10 years, and I've been down here for about 10 years. So I think the ideas are very similar, but the groups come together a lot more in Sydney. I don't know whether it's a geographical thing or just a social thing, but there's a lot more cohesion up there, and I've certainly found that putting this talk together that it's been hard to engage engaged with a lot of the groups. So that's hopefully something that this sort of event will start to improve.
Is that just because they're different socially, or is there schisms in the belief in the skeptical groups here in Melbourne?
I don't think so much the belief. It's very similar in terms of the desired outcomes and the issues that they want to address. It's more, I don't know, maybe it's just the people are very busy, that they're not really used to engaging. There are a few separate groups down here, and we're trying to build some relationships between them. Hopefully we'll get there. I think it'll be an ongoing thing.
And what's your personal woo? I'm asking everyone, what's their woo that gets their dander up? What's the woo that makes you be turned into the man who stares at goats?
Well, for me, it's the environment. That's probably the thing that brought me into skepticism in the first place. There is so much anti-science being pushed out to the general public on climate science, and there's a lot of distrust of people who have spent their life in the field and studying, and it's really overturned the public trust in science and the scientific process. So that's my personal one, and that's the one that I tend to engage with people the most. My other mini one is woo in business, because there is so much woo involved in training of people and getting across ideas within business and making decisions about leadership, and it's something that really, really bothers me. And that's Brian Dunning, who I know you know.
Oh, but Brian Dunning, top guy, he has the best spa in the state.
The Skeptical Spa. Brian's actually done a podcast on the Myers-Briggs personality test, and this is something that I actually took on head-on with my employer to limited success, but I think the points I made were very relevant, because they were really prepared to make decisions about people's future based on the outcomes of these tests. I had a big issue with that.
Wow. And is that the main woo you see? Because also in there's a lot of mateship and there's a bit of a boys' club involved in many businesses. Yep. Is that also part of the problem?
I don't think that's a problem in terms of woo, because really at the end of the day, any human endeavour is about relationships. So it really is about engaging with people. But I have a lot of issue with things being presented as this is a scientific sort of method, or this is a mathematical certainty that if we do these things, blah, 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 when it's based on rubbish.
Okay. And you mentioned the Myers-Briggs as being, because that's a one-off test and you get a result that's a one-off result.
And it's a personality profile.
Yeah, and then you're like putting that forward.
Yeah.
And look, just basically explain, that breaks people down into different types, doesn't it? We have about 12 types or so, is it?
And it's like a spectrum, basically, so you can fit anywhere within the spectrum. And you have on one side you've basically got your introverts, and on the other side you've got your extroverts, and there's different levels that you can be, and in some areas you can be extroverted, in some areas you can be introverted, so it does cross over. And what it does is it builds up this personality profile, but it forces people into boxes. Now, the point that I made during the training that we were receiving and the sessions that we went through at work was, I have a very different persona at work than what I have in my private life. I have a different persona at home than what I have in my work life. And events like this, I put on another persona, and you wear personas according to what the desired outcome is. Now, if I'm being put into a pigeonhole at work, and then future managers and current managers are making decisions as to where to put me in my career and how to use me based on those outcomes, they change. They evolve. So that was one of the things that I took up with the trainer was, this is all well and good, and this shows my personality profile now, but I will change over time. And I don't even agree with what's here anyway, because let's face it, I'm going to answer these questions how I think my boss is going to want to hear, and that affects the outcome.
Well, isn't this just a case of business uses it because it's a very easy tool and it's easy to understand, where in fact the real result's very complicated and most people couldn't understand it?
That's certainly true, but I think that if you look at the personality profiles in for example, under Myers-Briggs, it's very similar to astrology. You look at the astrology personality profiles, and every single person will identify with some part of every single profile. And Myers-Briggs is exactly the same. They could really give you any profile, and you'll read it through and go, I respond well to change, but yes, I do get a little bit upset sometimes. And it's all very general and vague.
Right. And what would be the downside of using it like that? Does that mean that person's pigeonholed? People will genuinely think, that person's good for that, and they won't consider other things. Does that really happen?
That absolutely happens, and that's the issue that I have with it, because these things are pushed particularly by business management schools and third-party external sort of courses that come in and say, we're experts in people management. And they'll come and say to managers, okay, to be a good leader, you need to understand your staff, and once you've understood your staff, you can push them in particular directions and use them in particular ways. So there were guys that were in my team who, for example, are programmers who tend to be fairly quiet, and they're not overly engaging, but I have seen these people in the right environment pitching to people in a sales role, and they're fantastic because they put on that hat for the role. So you can't simply say, well, this person's reserved and quiet, therefore I'll keep him away from a customer-facing role.
Well, you could call it a management tool, but you could also call it lazy management as well, because if you've got these pigeonholes, that means there's a lot less work a manager has to do to motivate someone or to move them into a different so-called box.
That's very true. And in my view, I was in the Army, I went through the Army officer training, and, I think Army officer training is very, very different from anything else that's in the private sector, because it's not about managing people, it's about leading them. And that's something that I think is really sorely lacking in a lot of management in Australia, and something I've seen some fantastic things overseas, but hopefully that's something that will change over time. Is it's not about managing your people. They are not computers, they are not machines, they are people.
Now, what I've noticed in some management is that the last thing that they want to do is actually manage. They want to sort of get on with whatever the job is defined as, and also refer up to the people above them and make the people above them see what they're doing. They're not so interested in micromanagement. And do you think this is something, this avoids people having to do micromanagement?
I think different managers have different styles, and that was something that was portrayed to us quite clearly in the Army, that, you will have a natural style that you will sort of lean towards. And there's nothing at all wrong to that. You should play to your strengths. But with any management role, you've got three responsibilities. You have a responsibility to your employer, your supervisors, who are the ones setting the agenda. You've got a responsibility to your subordinates, so the people that report to you. You're responsible for their career development. You're responsible for their day-to-day well-being. You're responsible for hearing their issues and that so forth. You're also responsible for the task, whatever the task is, or the mission. So, as you are, being tasked with achieving this outcome, and then it's a matter of balancing those responsibilities. And sometimes you have to buck the system a little bit and go against your employer. Sometimes you've got to go against your staff. Sometimes you've got to focus on the mission at hand. It really depends on what you're doing.
And as someone who's had training in the Australian Army, let's go completely off topic here.
Yep.
What is your favourite story of Australian Army leadership? Have you got one, an example? Is there a moment in a battle where some leadership decision was made that sticks in your mind as being, wow, that's leadership?
There's probably too many, to be honest with you. A lot of the leadership training we do in the Army looks beyond just Australian Army, because we have a fairly short history in the Australian Army. But there are terrific examples from Gallipoli. There are terrific examples from Africa, from the Pacific region during World War II. There literally are too many to name. But probably the ones that stood out for me the most in my training were actually some of the leadership of the Germans. You look at Rommel, who was considered an incredible leader, and what he actually achieved in Africa with his tank, regiments was just sensational. And looking at it simply from a leadership perspective and what he was able to achieve on so little. And you contrast that, for example, with what the Russians were able to do with their armoured, equipment. It was a very, very different outcome because of the manner in which they were required to lead. Very, very different structure.
Look, again, this is off topic, but I love going down a rat hole with this. The only limited leadership examples I've seen have been from history channels, and of course, that's very Americanised. Yeah. And one of the great leadership decisions I thought was made was to get off Omaha Beach. There was a rather rotund general that was smoking a cigar that managed to get a whole bunch of guys to charge a machine gun nest. Now, how do you get people to do that without actually getting in front of them and leading them?
Yeah, this is one of the things with leadership. There's a belief that really came out of the Vietnam era, where people pretty much, particularly with Australians, it's a case of if you try to manage your resources instead of leading them, you'll end up with a bullet in your back, because it's so easy to do in the jungle, there's an accident, whatever. And really that's the takeaway, I think, for military training, particularly in Australia, where we do tend to have people who do question authority naturally. It's a part of our national identity, I think, to question authority. I don't understand that. I don't understand Gallipoli, for example, where they were charging the guns and they were doing it wave after wave after wave at the orders of British commanders. It is really I just can't imagine being in that position.
Do you think that's part of the training of the time? There was an authority figure. We're here to do this, and was it a time thing at that time? I mean, now people just wouldn't refuse to do it, perhaps.
It could be. I mean, it's hard to put yourself in that position unless you've been there. Yeah. I mean, it sounds silly, but war changes everything, and when you are in those positions, bear in mind, these guys have been entrenched for months and months and months. They had serious health problems. They had lack of equipment, had lack of food. Things were very, very desperate, and there was a desperation. They wanted to get out of it. They wanted to move on. They didn't want to continue the stalemate. So that would have played into it to some degree as well.
Yeah. And this is nothing like the Gallipoli campaign here today, but can you expect a very dangerous rush at lunchtime?
Possibly. We've got plenty of food, thanks to Australian Skeptics. They sponsored us and were able to buy the food for the event. So I think we'll be fine with food. I was a little bit worried once the numbers were starting to creep up over 155 attendees. I was thinking, if lunch is going to be snacks, not so much lunch.
Now, I was hoping that someone would be giving a talk, would go batshit crazy and have to be dragged out. Now, will that be happening today?
There's still time. There's still time, Maynard. It may happen.
Cool. Okay, well, I'm wandering around here at Skeptic Camp, and it's great people coming up to me and just saying hello. And I've been asking people what their personal woo is. It's a great thing to ask anyone at these kind of things. But we have Peter Miller. Hi, Peter. That's what your name tag. That's what you claim to be today.
That's who I'm claiming to be. Yes.
Now, you've had a bit of a personal crusade against something that hasn't to do with anything with people. It's to do with pets.
Yes, this is a little kind of gadget called Shoe Tag. It's a credit card sized thing. Looks like a credit card, just like a credit card. It's got a
when was this available?
It started being marketed about 2 or 3 years ago. It's still currently available. In fact, it's doing very well. It's being sold out of America. It's out of Texas in America.
And what does it do and how is it supposed to work?
What it actually does is you hang it around your pet's neck.
Dog or a cat?
Dog or a cat or a horse. And it will, using data encoded on a magnetic strip on the back of the card, it will repel fleas and ticks and other pests.
So the magnetic field is supposed to repel these pests?
Well, that's a good question. Yes, perhaps that's what's happening. According to the manufacturers, what actually happens is that the data that's encoded on the card somehow creates an effect inside the pet's already existing energy field.
Already we're moving into the power band hologram area here.
Yes, totally like that. You would think that somebody marketing something like that would have some science. Well, they don't.
So you've had a bit of a action against this. Have you written to them? Do we have a board of standards for pets, things like that?
It's very interesting. It's actually quite complicated. They are selling this pet tag in Australia now, of course. And what they've started to do, which has become rather a little bit more concerning, is they're making a people version, and they've been shipping it they claim to have been shipping it to Africa to help with problems of mosquitoes and malaria.
Okay.
You can see that that's going to be...
Yes, well, that's where you get into the definite what's the harm area.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Oh.
And so, I basically found this thing a couple of years ago, and I did a very silly challenge on it, and over the years it's developed into something of a saga on my blog, so there's a lot of information available. Well,
look, let's tell people where your blog is so they can go and read about this, because it does sound like a very unlikely thing, and something would go under the radar, because unless people were very concerned about their pets being tricked by woo, this is not something people might not look into, because so what if your dog gets a few more fleas than usual?
Yeah. And also it's promoted as being, an alternative to chemical controls, and they bandy around the words green a lot, and it's sold as something that will be good for your pets and not harm them, but of course it does absolutely nothing, and so your pets are open to disease, and
And what's the address of your blog? How can we find it?
It's www.tetheredcow.com, and the tethered is spelt Tethed. There's no E in the tethered. It's a misspelling, and there's a reason for it.
And is there a way to Google you to find it easily as well?
You could just Google Tethered Cow or Google Reverend Anaglyph. And you'll find me.
Okay. Well,
or Google Shoe Tag.
Wow.
I'm the biggest critic available. Really? Yeah.
So if next time you're in a pet shop, remember, humans aren't the only ones susceptible to woo, because we put stuff on our pets.
And they're in a lot of Australian pet shops now, right on the front of the counter, credit card, little kind of container, and it sort of says, this is really good because it won't harm your pet. It won't harm your pet. It won't do anything.
Now, is there anyone who has actually done some A/B studies on it?
There are a few people throughout the world who've actually trialled it, but there have been, to my knowledge, no proper scientific studies done on it.
Well, he's just come off stage. Now, what was the topic of your talk today, Peter?
It was do be a dick. How to be impolite to people.
Oh, no, we'll just stand up here so we don't get the reverb off the wall there. We're going to go. Now, how did it go? I just caught the tail end of it there. Basically, you were saying don't waste time debating or arguing with the purveyors of woo. That's what you're saying,
That's
is it?
right, yes. You can, if someone is a true believer, and they're just believing what they from authority. That's fine. You can't argue with those people. And a lot of cases, that's not their fault. They've just been misinformed and misguided. It's the people who actually are doing the misinformation. They're the ones we've got to stop being polite to.
So back in the day, in your younger days, did you originally go out and debate these people?
I have done it occasionally. I learn from doing this and try not to do it again.
Is part of the problem you don't want to give them some sort of credibility as well?
No, not really. Part of the problem is that you don't know what they're going to say next, or they can just throw something up, particularly in a spoken debate. If you get to speak first, you get up and you give your 3-minute talk, they'll get up and they'll simply talk about something else. They don't respond to you. Yeah. And, of course, they then have the last word and that's it. Okay. If they speak first, they will say things that in their minute or two might take you 2 hours to explain why they're wrong.
Mm. So is there one group that would draw you out for a debate? Because I'm always asking about everyone's personal woo that annoys them the most. Is there one group that annoys you so much you would debate them under any circumstances, even if it made you look less than you would expect?
I'd be prepared to debate the anti-vaccination people, I think, but I'd have to have the rules set for the debate. You'd need a moderator who was totally unbiased, or you'd need to make certain rules about the certain things they could say, what they could refer to. So the rules are the main part of any debate, and that's where you're really losing a lot of these things, that they won't stick to the rules.
Well, the one I usually, when anti-vaxxers talk to me, they talk about the danger of mercury, and I mention, it's a very low dose and it's not in a form that's as easily absorbed as other forms, and then they say, well, would you go swimming in a swimming pool of it? Now, how are you going to debate that?
It's a ridiculous question. That they come to you. That's not your question. Their question. That's right. That's what I mean. You can't answer that sort of question. But in fact, when you say to them, well, there's only one vaccine in Australia that's got mercury in it now, any amount at all. And by the way, it isn't mercury, it's a mercury compound. And you point out to them that when that salt they put on chips consists of a metal which explodes and you put it in water, and a poisonous gas that was used in warfare in the First World War. Why are they prepared to have that? And they have no answer to that.
And look, something that I've been wondering about is that there was a study out earlier this year about a possible connection between antidepressant drugs and serotonin level and autism. And why haven't I heard more about that? I would have thought that would have been an area that the activists would have also wanted to look into as well.
I really don't know. With the autism business, there's two sorts of activists there. There's the people that are making money out of finding cures for autism. And because they keep saying things like, no, we can get mercury out of your child. Well, say if your child hasn't had a vaccination for the last 12 years, they haven't got any mercury preservative. By the way, the mercury was put in as a preservative in multi-dose vials. If it's a single-dose vial of single-shot vaccine, it's never had a preservative in it. And there's never been preservatives in things like the measles vaccine and so forth. There's those group. There are also a group of people who have autistic children who are desperately looking for an answer and a cure. But there are also a group of people who don't want a cure. And interestingly, they oppose the people that have the quack cures, not because they're quacks, but because they're offering a cure on the basis that their child, this is part of the personality of the child.
I see.
The autism. It's a defining thing about the child. I'm not quite sure. I don't think like that. I mean, if I had a child that had some kind of problem, I'd want, if I could find a cure, I'd be looking for it. It's similar to people. I remember seeing people complaining about cochlear implants because it removes a child's deafness.
Right, I see.
Which is a strange sort of a thinking that a disability that can be cured. No, we shouldn't do it because it takes away some personality from the child. Weird thinking.
But Peter Bowditch, you've seen a lot in the world of scepticism. What do you make of today's Skepticamp here in Melbourne?
I think it's good. I've only seen 3 talks so far, but like all of these sorts of the Skepticamp I've been to before, I think it's a great opportunity for people who don't often get to speak at conferences to get up and talk. People can talk about anything they like. Now, I know that people have been talking in the other room about how to get scepticism across to children in schools. This is an excellent thing. If we can teach people without saying we're going to teach you scepticism, but so we're going to teach you, and don't even say we're going to teach you critical thinking.
Yeah, because even that people go, oh, I'm going to be learning philosophy. Oh.
Yeah, that's right. It's just get kids to think about how they solve problems and how to look for evidence. And kids will do this. They're naturally inquisitive. They want to know the right answer. and they're quite happy to go and investigate and look at things. Every kid, I don't know what they do it these days, but every kid when I was at school had a chemistry set.
Yeah. Well, now they won't let you have them because they're too dangerous.
Well, I actually saw a cartoon the other day which showed that the level of danger in chemistry sets as they went down to the point where they only had one chemical in them, which is currently the way it works, and that chemical is salt.
Okay. Well, let's go get some lunch before everyone takes it.
That sounds like a good idea.
People are rushing, everybody's hushing here today at Skepticamp, and the man who helped put on Skepticamp Sydney was in fact Jason Brown. Hi Jason, how are you?
Hello Maynard, we're here again.
Now, you were due to be on first this morning, but due to a raging hangover in a brothel at the Oh My God nightclub, you couldn't get here.
That's quite true and scandalous, and I'm going to take you to court over it.
Oh, okay, that's good. Well, we're off to a good start now, so you can edit that bit out, Richard. No, don't you dare. I tell you were in there, basically you were saying, do be a dick, but to the right people. Is that what you were saying?
Yes. Originally I was going to do much the same topic as Peter Bowditch did this morning, but I decided to concentrate more on efficiency of message and get the best result. Maximum milk for minimum moo.
Now, one of your points you made there, which a lot of people don't think about, because a lot of people enjoy arguing online with the anti-woo person or woo person of their choice, is that time is a non-renewable resource. Please explain this to us.
Well, I love arguing with these people myself, but you don't get any result at the end of it, and you spend a lot of time not getting any result. And, none of us is getting any younger, Maynard. All this time is just being frittered away on shouting at Meryl Dorey when we could be talking to the public and getting them to vaccinate instead.
Now, you said for a while there that Meryl had been removed as the go-to person for the media as almost the opposite to vaccination, but she seems to be creeping back once or twice in the past week or so. Do you think that effect disappears over time and she'll get back to being well known again?
She'd like to, but SOVN is probably always going to be there to do that. But there's always going to be little holes will appear in the dike, and we have to stick our finger in it and plug the little gaps. This is going to happen for a while, and eventually it'll go away, I hope.
Look, and you've obviously been doing a lot of work with the anti-vaxxers. Is there another kind of woo that is sort of secondary that you like to look at as well? I've been asking everyone, and everyone mentions anti-vaccination people straight away because the harm can be seen directly there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I spent a lot of time arguing with creationists before I did this sort of thing, and I do kind of enjoy that. And while it frustrates me, because you can't change their mind, it's still very, very interesting, and I get to find out things about evolution that I never knew before. So I know all sorts of things about whale evolution, like Pakicetus and things like that I never knew.
Well, okay.
Through arguing with nutters.
Okay. As ancient astronaut theorists say, if our DNA was not mixed with to create the Cambrian explosion, what did?
Mathematical inevitability.
What, so all this stuff happened at once. Why couldn't have aliens have been messing with our DNA? In fact, lots of DNA to have all these animals turn up at once. That's what I read in the Eric von Daniken book.
Maynard, you've stumped me. But I do love those Eric von Daniken books.
Yeah.
Chariots of the Gods is one of my favourite books of all time.
Return to the Stars?
I haven't read Return to the Stars. Gold of the Gods.
Gold of the Gods is a really good one as well, and does have some really good photos from South America.
Well, yeah, it does. From Carlo Crespi, who was a friend of James Randi, I believe.
We were just, yes, I thought the moment would come. We were actually asked to leave the Skepticamp foyer because we
get used to it after a while.
You notice we were only asked to leave after we mentioned Eric von Daniken.
Well, I think that's censorship of opposing views. Frankly, we've been excluded because we want Eric von Daniken to have a voice.
Actually, do you enjoy looking at shows like Ancient Aliens, and do you enjoy watching paranormal documentaries that may be playing it a bit loose with the evidence?
I really used to a lot. They frustrate me at the moment. I have ups and downs. It's a little roller coaster ride through my brain, where I have my ups and downs, where I can watch them quite happily for a few months, and then I start pegging things at the television. And frankly, I can't afford a new television.
And what has been going on with your podcast? The fabulous hard-drinking podcast.
The Skeptacular In Vino Veritas podcast?
Yeah.
We have a couple of episodes in the can, so to speak.
3 episodes, and then the Can't Be Asked fairy came to visit.
Yes. Well, not to put the blame on my compatriot, Dave the Happy Singer, but he's taken over editing duties, and you'll have to ask him.
Oh, okay. But there are a few in the can, so in coming months, where would we find the podcast? Because I'm a fan of it. I'm a fan of it.
The podcast at invinoveritas.podcast.com or on iTunes under In Vino Veritas. Also through my website and through Dave's website. You can link to it from there. Yes, in the next couple of weeks, I think you'll be seeing a couple of new episodes.
Because it's funny, it's random. There's 2 skeptics, 3 bottles of alcohol.
What could be better?
What could go wrong?
Well, plenty goes wrong.
I'm just imagining if I had pitched this to the ABC as summer programming. Now, we've got 2 guys, and over an hour or 2, they're going to drink 3 bottles of wine, and it's going to go out live. I could just imagine the legal department going, sure, I can't see a problem with that.
We promote responsible consumption of alcohol.
Oh, you certainly do, but it's what you say about. It's a bit like No Agenda. The second half of the show just starts going wild.
I can never remember the second half of the show, Maynard. I'll have to listen back.
So that's a compelling reason to listen to the 3 existing episodes and any that might be coming up. And look, Jason, what do you make of the Melbourne Skepticamp? Any differences from Sydney?
I think they've done a lovely job. It seems more intimate than Sydney. Sydney was quite, one big room and then a long distance to the second room, so it was not so friendly and close-knit.
Do you think the topics are slightly different? Are the skeptics in Melbourne interested in anything different?
I think the TGA stuff with Ken Harvey has been very important to the Melbourne skeptics. So that sort of regulatory and sort of public activism stuff is very important in Melbourne. It's been a little bit different to the way Sydney was. And of course, we've got Surf Coast coming up in January out on the Great Ocean Road, which will be different again, I hope. So that'll be fun.
And of course, we're all looking forward to drinks afterwards, aren't we?
Yes, at the good old Clyde Hotel, where we inevitably end up after every skeptical gathering.
Okay, you get in there.
It'll be wonderful. Thank you, Maynard.
I'm here with... just tell us who you are.
I'm Joanne Benhumu.
And professionally, you are a nurse?
I'm a clinical nurse specialist.
Right. And what is the name of your talk, which is up there?
The name of my talk is Getting to the Bottom of Colon Cleansing.
Wow. Now, as someone on the show last week, you told everybody that I had recently been inside a bottom.
Yes, I did, didn't I?
Yeah. And look, I'm fine with that. My private life being exposed is fine. But what you meant was that I was inside a large... oversized colon. It was almost half the size of this lecture theatre, and I walked through it.
That's absolutely right. It's an invaluable exhibit that they've got on for educating people about bowel health.
And in fact, my dad has pestered me so much, and this is the only reason, that I'm actually going to have a colonoscopy and what's it when you put it down?
It's either an endoscopy or a gastroscopy. People find it quite confusing because...
Well, I'm having both done at the same time to shut him up, and I don't have to go back for 10 years.
That's fantastic, and it's something I encourage all people to do, is to talk to their doctors about their bowel health and find out about what the appropriate screening is for them. Because
see people at home going, ugh, listening to this now, because this is a topic that's not pleasant.
Exactly.
It's not fun. Yeah, exactly.
People don't like talking about their bottoms.
I know, understandably. But at what age should you actually go and start? I mean, if you don't have any problem, at what age should you actually go and have a screening? Because I haven't got any problems at all, and I'm thinking, why should I even go and have a look?
Well, the recommendations are that anyone over the age of 50 should be having...
I'm not there yet. I'm going a couple of years early.
Do you have a family history of bowel cancer?
I think there is someone somewhere, yeah.
So people who do have a close relative who has had bowel cancer, it's recommended that they start screening once they hit the age of 40. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to pop off and have a colonoscopy, but you should at least be having a conversation with your doctor about what's appropriate for you. And in some people, it's just a matter of having a little test called a fecal occult blood test. And again, people find it a bit icky because you have to send off a little bit of poo to a laboratory.
Yeah, and again, look, to me, this would be the number one reason why no one wants to have anything to do with it.
Yeah, absolutely. People find it embarrassing, and it's one of those conversations that people don't like talking about it, but it is so important. And the reason it's so important is that bowel cancer is one of the most preventable cancers, and if it's caught early, that is, and by doing so, I think really looking at the statistics, it's got the second highest death rate after lung cancer, but it's one of the highest, most diagnosed cancers, but it's also the most preventable if it's caught early.
And will you be showing any graphic? I mean, will you have a photo of a large inflatable colon in your...
Oh, I've got far more interesting photos than inflatable colons, because I'm actually going to be talking today more about some of the myths about the bowel and some of the weird and wonderful things that people believe about what we need to do to look after our bowels, because there's a huge amount of misinformation out there about how the bowel works and what we need to do to look after it.
My mum's got diverticulitis. Does that mean that I could have something? And what is that?
Diverticulosis is where there are small small sort of pockets that form in the bowel wall, and it's quite an anatomical thing. It's just sort of where there are weaker points along the bowel, and they form little pockets.
Is there nothing wrong with that? Because she's told she can't eat nuts.
The thing is that what can happen is people can get feces trapped in those little pockets. They can also become inflamed, and that's when you get diverticulitis. So diverticulitis is when you get inflammation of those little pockets in the bowel, and it can be very uncomfortable, and people who've got diverticulosis are often advised to just sort of watch what they eat because of things that might irritate it.
And what's the biggest piece of woo? What is something that people are told over and over again not to do for bowel health or to do for bowel health that really doesn't make a difference either way?
In fact, things like drinking lots and lots and lots of water, while being hydrated is important, what we get in our normal diet keeps us pretty well hydrated. A lot of people are told
what about if you're at a rave and you're on your second E? I mean, I was always told to drink lots of water, but not too much.
I don't think people will be thinking too much about their bowels in that case.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But a lot of the beliefs about things like having a clean bowel and colon cleansing, so people going off and having colonic irrigation.
I have had 2 colonic irrigations in my life.
Oh, you poor thing.
and I went to the first one, and it was one of the most unusual experiences I've ever had in my life. And it felt like it did absolutely nothing, and I thought, oh, well, everyone says I'll give it another go, and the second go, and it was one of the weirdest things I've ever done in my life, and nothing actually happened. And is that because they can't go up high enough to do anything, and you don't really want?
No. In fact, it actually, when they do perform colonic irrigation, they actually can clean out the entire length of the bowel all the way to the cecum, which is where your small and large bowel meet up. So it travels a long way up.
And what's the advantage of that?
There is no advantage. There is absolutely no advantage to it. People will suddenly feel lighter, and they might have a bit of a flatter stomach immediately, but straight afterwards your colon will just fill up again. The claims that are made about colon cleansing is that it detoxifies you, and people who believe in this stuff believe that your bowel is full of toxins, and that there are years and years of feces that are sitting in there clogging you up and poisoning you, but there's absolutely no evidence to support that. And
I was told that like some of your old drugs might come on again because they'll be washed further down. Didn't happen.
No, there's that's
which is a bit of a bad thing, because I would not like to think that anything I've taken is still up there from a couple of years ago.
Exactly. I mean, it's kind of like, the whole thing about chewing gum, that if you swallow your chewing gum, that it's going to, sit in your stomach for years. Well, I can tell you now, I've looked into a lot of people's stomachs and colons, and I've never seen any chewing gum hanging around in there. So.
Now, as far as you medically know, is there anyone that would have an advantage from having a colonic irrigation?
Look, there are people who have certain, for example, people who have difficulty in going to the toilet normally, like people who have spinal cord injuries and so on. Cleaning out their bowels shouldn't be done through a colonic irrigation, which is often performed by someone really with no medical background. There are other ways to do that, for example, things like enemas, and they're usually performed by medically qualified people, and they are diagnosed. Sorry, they are prescribed by doctors and given by people who know what they're doing. Whereas with something like colonic irrigation, there are significant risks involved and not good evidence at all for their use. So there are some people who really do actually need help with going to the toilet.
So what are the risks? Someone could turn the tap on too hard?
Well, actually, yeah, that would be a risk, actually, if you're putting too high pressure through the bowel.
Although mostly it's gravity feed, so it's usually okay. But...
Well, there's 2 ways, actually. They can do it through gravity or mechanically. And the pressure from the water could do damage to the bowel, but also there's a risk from the tube itself of perforating the bowel, and that can actually that could kill someone. You can get a catastrophic infection from that. And I mean, look, there are medical procedures that carry similar risks, but in the case of those medical procedures, there's very good evidence for doing them. They're done in a controlled environment, and patients are informed and aware of those risks, whereas with something like colonic irrigation, you're taking a risk for no benefit.
Now, what the name of your talk, of course, is Getting to the Bottom of the Colon Cleansing. Now, is that available online? Can we see it anywhere online yet?
No, not as yet, but I'll see what I can do about that, because if people are interested, I'd be more than happy to provide it.
So let's see now. We're going to get the jokes. Is this a bum rap? Will anyone poo-poo your talk? What else has been done so far?
Oh, let's see. Sorry, my brain's just suddenly...
Have people said that you're talking out of your bum?
Yeah, talking out of your bum. In fact, bum, Tam Oz, boobs was the catchphrase. watchword for Tamars. We've decided bums is the word for Skepticamp. So,
okay, well,
yeah.
Joe, bum on.
Thank you, Maynard. I will.
Hi, this is Surly Amy from Skeptic.Org. I make ceramic jewelry. It's hand-formed and hand-painted. It's inspired by science and skepticism. You can find it at surlyramics.com, surlyramics.com. Thanks, and be skeptical.
Now it's time for Dr. Rachie Reports with Dr. Rachel Dunlop.
And I'm here at the 2011 Shonky Awards, the Choice Shonky Awards, and I'm with Chris Barnes from Choice. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Rachel.
Thanks for talking to us. We've just wrapped up the award ceremony, or the, I guess, non-award ceremony today. One of the products that got a big shout-out today was SensorSlim, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah. Yep. They're a classic case of a Shonky, really. A product that clearly doesn't live up to its claims in any way, shape or form, and which the company that sells it, defends themselves through the courts, using every possible tactic. Thoroughly deserving a Shonky, I think.
Yeah, and I noticed with interest that you gave the TGA an honourable mention in the Shonky for SensorSlim. Can you tell us why you did that?
Well, look, this is a little outside my area, but the TGA, time and time again, seems to prove itself to be something of a toothless tiger in this kind of arena. It's clearly got the responsibility to administer drugs and medications, which SensorSlim, if it worked, should be classed as. But it just seems that they have absolutely no ability. Perhaps they're limited in resources and funding, like so many government agencies. But they seem to be very limited in their ability to achieve anything. When they do hand down a ruling, companies seem to sometimes ignore those, at whim, because the penalties are too easy for them to shrug off. So I have a little bit of sympathy with probably the very hard-working people in the TGA, but the organisation as a whole really needs something of an overhaul, I think.
Yeah, well, when Christopher Zinn, who's the media spokesperson for Joyce, was presenting that award today, he was mentioning the name Peter Foster. Now, many people in Australia would know Peter Foster as the famous con man, who famously was caught trying to escape from Vanuatu in his underpants or something, right? So, yes. I mean, these people are not unknown to authorities here, are they? You
would think that a name like that would be a big alarm bell for people in the TGA and anyone else who had anything to do with SensorSlim. Look, I don't know how Peter Foster ended up involved or exactly what his involvement with the company was, but as I say, when someone with his track record is involved, you know that there's something likely to be amiss, as it turned out to be.
Yeah. And there was also an institute that was apparently doing all the clinical studies in Switzerland that Christopher said turned out they sort of copy-pasted pictures of people that didn't exist and sort of made up a website.
Well, yes, I believe that the scientists they listed, they copied photographs of scientists from other organisations elsewhere around the world who obviously had absolutely nothing to do with it and were probably rightly horrified when they found out what had been done. Choice has its own laboratories. We're NATA accredited. We know the rigour and detail that is required to run a proper laboratory. The instrumentation that needs to be calibrated, the training of the staff, and we work with a lot of other highly accredited laboratories as well. So it's particularly painful to us to find out that there are these sort of Shonky labs out there, if lab is even the right word, that pass themselves off as giving valid results and useful scientific results, and couch it all in nice scientific sounding terms, so that the layman will see that and think, oh, this is lab tested, it must be all right. It's simply not the case.
Well, the other thing, I guess, too, in that is the TGA approved, which is what they claim as well.
Well, exactly, and the consumer is entitled to think that a phrase like a label like TGA approved means something, that it is actually a hallmark of quality. And unfortunately, so often it turns out not to be.
Yeah. In fact, it's illegal to say TGA approved. According to the TGA, you're not allowed to make that claim. But of course, like many things that the TGA say, never get enforced.
Well, yes. It goes back to my before that they are something of a toothless tiger, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, there was one piece of good news at the beginning of the proceedings today when Christopher mentioned that last year Power Balance was given a Shonky. And what's happened to Power Balance since?
Well, Power Balance, the company, after we gave them a Shonky, we put their products through the test and found, of course, that there was nothing more than a rubber band with some plastic attached. Didn't do any of the claims that it made to improve your strength and flexibility and everything else. The ACCC got onto it, banned them. This is great. This is a regulator doing what it should do.
Yeah.
And that was fantastic to see. The company in Australia went into administration, I think, and closed down. I think the guy who ran it went overseas. He said he was going to come back and face the music, but I don't know if he did or not. I haven't followed up on that.
Is that Tom O'Dowd?
Tom O'Dowd, yeah. So he may have done that, but I haven't followed that. But as far as I know, the company is still going strong in the States.
Yes, it is.
And then, even if Power Balance itself had completely disappeared off the face of the earth, as you well know, every time you shut one of these guys down, 2 or 3 more spring up. It's like fighting the Hydra, and there are so many other of these Shonky rubber band type products out there, making these ludicrous claims with absolutely no basis to them. And so, I mean, it's great to knock down one of the big ones, like Power Balance, but people really need to be aware that everything else out there that looks the same and makes the same claims is the same. In other words, it's rubbish.
So there was one of the other Shonkys that was awarded today was Go Green Power Saver.
Oh, the Go for Green.
Go for Green, yeah.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of these gadgets around. We tested one last year or the year before, I can't remember, another power saver device. These power factor correction devices, which is usually what they are, if they even achieve that, mind you, power factor is basically a measure of how efficiently the supply of electricity into your house or factory or whatever is actually being used. When you're using huge amounts of electricity, as you are in a factory or a huge building, commercial building, you actually do get charged for power factor because the electricity company has to supply a vast amount of power to that building. It wants to make sure that it's doing that as efficiently as it can. So those sorts of institutions and facilities do get charged for poor power factor. So they have big power factor correction devices set up in their plants. The ordinary consumer's home doesn't need that because the ordinary consumer is only actually charged for the electricity that they actually use. And this might not sound very good in these days of trying to keep everything green and generating less power, but if the electricity company has to actually generate twice as much power to supply you with the power that you need because your home is so inefficiently wired and you've got such a poor power factor, well, that's not very good for the environment, but you don't pay for it. You only still pay for that electricity you use. And the fact is, modern appliances and modern homes have generally, on average, have a reasonably good power factor, so there's not actually huge amounts to be saved by correcting power factor in any case. So that's all that these devices can do. Some of them don't even succeed in doing that. At best, you're going to save a cent here or a cent there, and when they're charging you $200 or $300 for the thing, it's an absolute rort. Anything that claims to reduce your power simply by plugging it into a circuit, treat it like the piece of Shonky equipment that it probably is. The only way to really save power is use less of it. Turn your appliances off at the wall. Don't turn your air conditioner on if you don't need to. All that sort of stuff. Common sense stuff, really.
Yeah. One of the other ones we looked at today was also the baby bling, which I couldn't believe that people sell that. It's basically a dummy or a pacifier that has crystals glued onto the front of it.
That's right. Look, I think a lot of the people making these were small businesses, work-from-home mums, that sort of thing. And of course they all meant well, and they thought they were creating something beautiful that people could, have their beautiful babies put in their mouths and everyone would be happy and everyone would look beautiful. And but being well-meaning in this area just isn't good enough. There are regulations about dummies, about babies' dummies and pacifiers. The size they have to be, the teat has to have certain tensile strength, so it's not going to come off in the baby's mouth. And we test these at Choice, so we know all about that aspect. But of course, one of the things that you can't have is small parts that can come off.
Yeah,
on any kid's
kind of
products.
A choking hazard, right?
Absolutely. Look, choking hazards, small parts that break off or that come off, under easy sort of force, which these crystals unfortunately usually were. Toy standards, all that sort of thing, they're very strict on that kind of thing, because choking hazards are actually the most dangerous hazard on any kid's products usually, certainly on toys and anything that's going to go near the baby's mouth like a dummy. We get scares about lead in paint on kids' toys from time to time. A few years ago there was that big scare in China, and that's important. We have regulations to keep that sort of thing under control. But in actual fact, that's quite rare. The far bigger hazard is cheap, rubbishy toys or other products that can be pulled apart, that will break and create small parts that a kid can ingest. And putting crystals on a dummy was really never going to be a good move.
No. And I think Chris mentioned that they're banned in Australia, but you can still get them on the internet, right?
Well, that's the beauty of the internet, isn't it? We bought some online from America. Most of those websites are now saying for novelty use only, only for decoration, all that sort of stuff. But, well, yeah, that's all well and good. But if someone's buying a dummy and it's got all this wonderful bling on it and they want to show off their beautiful new baby, you can bet your bottom dollar that someone's going to put them in the kid's mouth.
Yeah,
and it's great that they've been banned here, and that's shut down some of the industry here and has created some awareness as well. So I think parents are probably a bit more aware than they might have been that you shouldn't do that sort of stuff. But unfortunately, you can still get them, and parents just need to be smart about this stuff. Don't buy things that your kid might be able to pull apart. Only buy things that meet Australian standards and Australian regulations as far as you can.
Well, just finally, Chris, there was one thing that really caught my attention today, and that was the magical quail eggs that apparently can cure cancer, can remove radionucleotides from your body, can
and
reduce
don't forget improved male potency.
Oh, I'm sorry, of course. Well, I actually had one of the quail eggs because you guys actually cooked some up and brought them out on little bits of toast.
Yeah.
So I think, I don't know, do I look younger yet?
Well, you're positively glowing. It's clearly, no, look, I mean, quails are very cute birds, as you saw, because we had a few quails.
Yeah, we have some here. They're very cute.
And that's great. And quail eggs are obviously delicious, and eggs are good for you, in moderation. And quail eggs aren't an exception there. But to make sort of ludicrous claims like, improves male potency and all the other sort of claims that they list on their website, well, they're basically, again, claiming it's a medicine.
Yeah.
And there's been absolutely no solid research to prove any of those
Well,
claims.
hang on, wasn't there something in the Indian Times?
Oh, the Nigerian Tribune.
Right.
Yes, so the Nigerian Tribune did publish an article claiming that they improved male potency, among other effects, I think. But,
I think there was a claiming to cure cancer somewhere too,
curing
wasn't there?
cancer, that was it. Yeah, look, I mean, we don't normally take the Nigerian Tribune as a quality source material.
Really? I'm surprised to hear that.
With all due respect to the hard-working journos at the Nigerian Tribune. Look, eat the eggs because they're tasty. And
I can vouch for that, they were tasty.
Protein and all the other things that eggs are good for. But, don't fool yourself that you're going to, improve your health in all those other respects that they claim.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Chris, for joining us. I've just been given a fresh, shiny new copy of the brand new Choice magazine, which has got all the Shonkys from 2011. And I guess there'll be stuff on the website pretty soon.
Yes, that's right. Should be up there today. I think.
And people in Australia, you would have seen it on the news a couple of days ago. So, sorry, we're recording this. It won't go out for a couple of days. But thanks for doing the stuff today, Chris. And you were, by the way, one of the models I didn't mention.
That's correct, yes.
So you're wearing your official Choice lab coat.
Yes.
And you kind of came out and wheeled out the door for the insurance.
Yes, and I've got to carry the quails and all that sort of stuff. So it's a bit of good fun for a lot of Choice people to come out and be part of today. And, there is a fun element to it. But, of course, there is that serious message underlying it all, which is there's a lot of shonky stuff out there and, people need to be aware and regulators need to crack down on some of these people too.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us today, Chris.
Okay, thanks very much, Rachel.
Dr. Rachel Dunlop is one of Australia's foremost media commentators in matters concerning so-called alternative medicine. She has appeared on national radio and national television. Dr. Rachie is available for interviews, and you can contact her at rachel@skepticzone.tv. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. Now, on my way back from the conspiracy panel, which was really good, I bumped into Julia Lavarnway. Hello.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm fine. Now, you've got a very important position here with the committee, haven't you?
I'd like to think so. I'm the managing editor of the Skeptical Inquirer, our flagship publication.
That's quite a title. That's quite a title. I mean, wow. And what does that involve?
I'm kind of the liaison between our senior editor, Ken Frazier, who actually decides everything that goes in the magazine, and the author of each article.
So when I write my award-winning expose on something or other, I write to you?
Well, you would send it to Ken, and he would say whether he wanted it for the magazine or not.
Right.
And if he said that he did, which obviously he would want to publish something you wrote.
Of course.
But if he said that he did, then he would send it to me for copy editing and proofreading, along with other members of our staff who are support in that department. And we would make sure that it gets ready for you to take a look at and give final approval. And if you have any changes, I make sure that those are done to your liking.
Well, of course, just not so long ago, I wrote a little piece about power balance.
You sure did.
Which appeared in, was it the very last issue or the one before? I can't remember, of the Skeptical Inquirer.
I believe it was in July, August 2011,
Right.
but you might not want to quote me on that.
Very recently.
Very recently.
And
Within the past 3 issues.
It was, yep.
Yes.
So I wrote my article for you, and it was one or two back and forth to suggest a change here and there or a quick edit.
And that was it.
And that was it. It was so painless, folks. Absolutely
I hope you were
painless.
happy with it.
I love. Yes, it was fun. Despite my appalling writing, it still made it to the magazine.
Oh, too humble, too humble.
So that's really great. You must get. It must be a really interesting job. You must get submissions and all sorts of things to read.
Yes, I really love it. What I love about our magazine is the topics are so varied. I get to read about something different every single day. One day I'll be reading about UFOs. One day I'll be reading about homeopathy. One day I'll be reading about, Lucy being discovered and the controversy surrounding that. It's very varied, and I just really love my job.
Where are you based?
Our headquarters are in Amherst, New York, which is actually right outside of Buffalo.
Buffalo's in New York?
Buffalo is in New York.
In New York State, right.
In New York State.
I heard Buffalo has more cloudy days than any other city in America. I'm not sure if that's true.
It might be true. I think Seattle is known for their rain and cloudy days, but we do get some nice days, and because it's so cloudy a lot of the time, we really enjoy them.
I bet you do. And in that part of the country where you're in the wintertime, it's feet of snow and all that sort of stuff, snowmen?
Sometimes. Yeah. We certainly have had our fair share of blizzards.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, that sounds like fun. No, it doesn't. But yes, it does. Yes, it does. Speaking from someone from Sydney, a blizzard sounds like a lot of fun. So one day I will. I must get up to that part of the world. I mean, I've made it as far east as Atlanta for DragonCon, of course, Atlanta, Georgia.
That's fairly far east.
That's pretty far east, but not very far north.
Not very far north.
So northeast is where I should set my sights.
Yes, you should visit our headquarters. We'd love to have you there, love to have you give a talk.
That would be cool. I would really love to. That would be fantastic. Yeah. Okay, there's my goal. That's my goal. After TAM, I think. Well, maybe after TAM.
Maybe before, maybe after.
Maybe.
Whenever you'd like to come, we'd love to have you.
Thank you. Well, see how nice it is here, folks, at this wonderful Committee for Skeptical Inquiry convention, which is even a mouthful. More interviews from this convention coming up over the next few weeks, and indeed more interviews from Skepticamp coming up over the next few weeks. So it'll be a bit of a mixed bag from here on in. We'll try to sneak in a think tank before long when we can. And I've just looking over to the tables over there. There's tables of T-shirts and books for sale, and there's a little UFO hovering above the
Yes.
The cups.
You can make your own UFO. We have a kit.
It's really strange because how we're looking at it now, it really is just floating in the air.
It appears to be floating in the air.
It appears, I'm a believer.
What do your skeptical senses tell you, Richard?
Well, right now, my senses are telling me that's floating in the air with no visible means of support. But
Can you trust your senses, Richard?
Of course I can trust my senses. Are you crazy? I might have to buy myself a little UFO kit. I bought one of the T-shirts over there with the alien on it, with the skeptical pointing to the Skeptical Inquirer. That's
a popular one.
That's a great T-shirt. Oh well. Anyway, we better wrap up the show so our listeners can get off the treadmill or stop driving around the block.
That sounds good.
Finally get to sleep, or finish cooking the dinner.
We don't want to keep the dinner from the children.
Well, thank you for having a little chat with me. And until next week, from beautiful, beautiful and interesting I knew where we were. She's whispering to me, New Orleans. It's not Atlanta, is it?
We're not in Atlanta.
We're not in Atlanta. From beautiful New Orleans, Louisiana. See, you haven't got the state right.
You got the state right, even.
Thank you. This is Richard Saunders signing off.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.